Hello, folks. I've been using the new tables feature in Google Sheets. I'm sure many of you have, and I wanted to share how you can use tables in formulas. So I have two different tables here, and if we were to investigate them, I have table 2 and table 3. Those could be renamed right here. I could call this, maybe this is a particular time frame or whatever you might want to call your tables. Right now they're table 2 and table 3. You can adjust your table range. We can see that our table range is set from A1 to D15, so that's the size of this table. But notice if I start to type a name in here, let's say I type John, and it's right up against this particular screen, or right up against the end of the table. Notice the table expanded itself even though I was outside of the table. So if I didn't want that, I would have to come back to my table range and go ahead and put this back to 15 and say, okay, and now that John can live there and not be part of the table. But let's take a look at a formula and what happens when you want to use a formula in a table. In this case, I have, let's say I want to do a count of the regions in one or both tables. So I could do equal count A. So I'm going count A. Now I could just decide I want to see how many are in B here. And notice that's going to give me the count from all of the range of B1 to B. And it's telling me that there's 15 because it's actually including that first row region where it's named region. Let me change that to B2. So this formula you can see here equals count A, B2, B. Let's go ahead and copy that and put it in here. We'll put a tick in front of it and paste it in so you can see that. So this is count A of B2, B. Now, if I were to use the new tables feature, let's go equals count A, and we'll go ahead and put that in there. And now notice if I start typing table, my list of tables that actually show up here, and notice I have table 1, table 2, table 3, and then I've got these things with brackets. So if I want to do a count A of the region, notice it's going to, interesting, region doesn't show up here. Let's say I want to do a count A of table all. Well, if I do that, I'm going to get 60 because it's going to give me everything in here. Let's just check that. So this, using that table feature, is basically giving me a count of everything here. Well, that's not really what I'm after. So let's go back here and change this from all. Let's use our bracket and go, we have table, well, actually we're on table 2. So let's choose table 2. And notice I have all, or I can choose the columns as they're named, and I'll choose region. And now that gives me what I expected it to be, 14. Let me go ahead and copy this and come over here, put a tick in front of it, paste it, and then you can see the difference on these two different formulas. Now what happens with this formula, that's this one here, what happens with this formula, in fact, let's go ahead and just drag these two things right down here like this, so we can see this is the count formula. Now if I were to add something anywhere in here, any text, notice that's going to increment because I'm counting everything here. But notice it did not increment here because this formula is just doing the part of the region. Now if I move this up to here, notice it automatically added it into my range of my table, and that's an incorrect name for our drop down, but you can see that means that brings it in as part of that. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. So what I wanted to really show here is the difference between using this old system of accessing this data or accessing the new table version. So let's take a look at another sheet here. I have table 1 on here. It's really a duplicate of another. Let's take a look at how we can also write some other, for instance, a query. Now here's an example of a sum, and I'm using the sum and using table 1, and notice, let's just start this over again. So I have a sum and get rid of that, and if I start typing table, it's going to give me table 1, all of these, so I could choose table 1, and now I would press this, I'm choosing table 1, and now I would be able to do a sum of this column, that would be my sales, and that gives me my 13,110. Notice my table's way of writing that, instead of doing a sum of this, and notice that's the same amount. If I were to sum C to or all of C in that case, I could get that same sum of 13,010. Now let's look at a query using this table syntax. So I'm doing a query, table 1 all. Again, notice I'm looking at everything in table 1. Now, the nice part about this is if I were to add, let me go ahead and add 10 more rows to this. Notice I end up with more information here. Notice I actually have, when I did that, let me undo that and show you what happened there. Notice this query is written right here, and it's when I added 10 rows, I got a blank line in where my formula is, and that's because we would want to not use, we'd want to use a where statement saying where this is null, not null, so that we're not counting these blanks, because basically what we're getting there is blanks. And we can see that if we were to put some numbers in here, you can see there's that number I just put in there, and that's my blank. That's the sum of my blank. So let's go ahead and first of all add in another person here. Let's say this is another one with John, and he's got, you know, $300 and some. Notice that should have added to my John total. So let's fix this part. So we're going to select sum C where that would be column A. Let's see, we're doing the names where A is not null. And that should, and it does, you can see, get rid of those blanks. Now in this case, I don't have the is not null, and notice in this case I'm doing my pivot on the region, and I have this $236 because here's my region, and if I were to copy this down, notice it would sum that, and that's all for regions that are not identified. And so if I were to identify those regions, then those numbers would actually go away. We can get rid of that. But if I don't want to see this blank, again, I'm going to do the same thing I did here, where A is not null in this case. We will copy that, and then in this case, we're probably thinking about whether or not it would be B, where B is not null, and we would go ahead and change that to B. And then we can get rid of that space. And here, our pivot D is the date. We would just do the same thing in front of this, where A, B, C, D is not null. And then I get rid of those blank spaces. So a little trick there to clean up some spaces with that. And notice when we added this data in here, let's go ahead and just take a look at some data that we're going to add for John here. And notice John's amount right here. Let's just make that red let's just make that red so we can see it right now. There's John's amount. Now watch what happens if we add to this table, and I'm going to just add a date, add some in there. Notice John's amount. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in all the way down, and we're going to actually fill this data with John all the way down. Just keep adding that in there just to show you. So now notice how John's total has changed, even though we're just looking at table 1. And so, in other words, as we added to the table, it automatically, we didn't have to adjust the range because it's part of the table. And that's a handy way to be able to use this. When in the olden way, if we had defined the range as basically A1 to D15, and then we had added data, it would not have picked it up. But when it's inside of the table reference, it does pick it up.